Okay, I believe we're live, and you're very welcome and good morning, everybody. I hope you're thoroughly enjoying the conversations that have happened at this conference so far. I know I certainly have. I was listening into the last one, and it was really insightful and lovely to see what an impact social value has. My name is John Ryan from an organization called Healthy Place to Work, and it's my joy to chair today's session, the title of which is Quantifying Social Wellbeing Created by Real Estate. And so we've got a fantastic lineup of speakers on the panel today, including Craig White, who's CEO of Agile Homes, Phoebe Mangoma-Dennis, who's from the Social Value Portal, Penny Goodall-Quraishi from International Wellbeing Institute, and finally Olivia Sutcliffe from Savills. And they have fantastic input to really bring this topic alive, and maybe lots of innovations that are there, which I certainly didn't know about, and I do now, and we're really looking forward to giving them an opportunity to contribute today. Hopefully we'll be able to just start by having a quick poll, and there's only just two questions we'd like just to try and help the panelists really focus what they're contributing on. Can I ask if the people who are joining us today are representing the public or the private sector? If we could just ask that question first, please. Hopefully the poll is there for you all to see and access. And hopefully we'll be able to get a poll result, which will give the panelists an opportunity to focus on more the public or the private sector. Okay, the second question is whether or not you actually work in real estate, or is it just a general interest in social value that you actually have? So again, it would be great if you could just let us know, so the panelists again can focus their attention on the areas where the audience is coming from. So a housing association is one. Okay, great. Same here from Suzanne. The third sector, youth development. Okay, great. Nice to get a sense of that. Brilliant. Well, let's kick off, because I know we don't have a huge amount of time today, but we've a lot to get through. So we're going to start with Phoebe from maybe actually just I'll ask you very quickly just to do a 1 minute quick introduction before I go around. So Phoebe, would you mind doing a quick introduction at the very start?
Yes, absolutely. Hello to everyone that's joining us today. I'm Phoebe. I'm a senior consultant at Social Value Portal, and I work in the planning sector, in the real estate sector, typically creating social value strategies around new developments.
Fantastic. Next, Penny.
Thank you, John. Good morning, everyone. I am Penny Goodall-Quraishi. I'm an account manager and director for the EMEA region at the International Wellbeing Institute. And my background, I'm a former HR executive, so my focus has always been on people. And now I have the privilege of helping organizations use the wellbeing standard to create spaces that are not only healthier and more sustainable, but that also create social value.
Fantastic. And you pronounce your name much better than I do, so thank you for that. Next up is Craig.
Hi, thank you, John. Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you all virtually. My name is Craig White. I'm CEO of Agile Homes, and we design, make, and deliver properly affordable homes using modern methods of construction. But today I'll be talking mostly about how we use social value calculations to reduce the cost of land.
Fantastic. And finally, Olivia. Olivia, are you there? Olivia was with us a little bit earlier on, so I'm not sure if that line has just gone down. It's a bit like the Eurovision, isn't it? When you're trying to call in a country and you say, if I keep talking for a second, maybe she's desperately trying to hit the button to reconnect. No? Okay. Well, we'll take it that she's just disconnected for a moment and that she'll come back on in a particular second. Somebody else here from the build to rent sector, and also particularly keen to hear how we can contribute to social value whilst delivering a return to our investors. And I think we definitely have that covered with our panelists today. So let's start with Phoebe. So Phoebe, obviously I'm really excited to talk to you about your real estate well-being calculator and the attributes that relate to that. But maybe just to position this correctly at the very, very start, maybe you could give us a little bit of an introduction to the social value portal and the tools that you use.
Yeah, absolutely. If we could move the slides along, Olivia, I have a bit of a visual to speak to as part of this. So I think, yeah, perfect. So as lots of you all know, being the Social Value Conference, Social Value Portal and a lot of the work that we do is very much centered around using the TOM system as a way of quantifying social value. And in my team, we work on quantifying social value in the built environment. So the TOM system helps us to understand how real estate can deliver change at a societal level. And when we're looking at the TOM system in the context of the built environment, we're really thinking about those activities and interventions that different kind of delivery partners across the life cycle of a development can actually support. So what can the design team do in that early stage to create some social value opportunities? How can the construction partner and their supply chain unlock social value through the building? And then how can the long-term operation of a site, whatever the use case might be, how can that be managed in a way to maximize social value for the community that it's sitting within? And we've been doing that for quite some time. And as kind of teams were getting more and more experienced talking about social value, embedding social value early on into a project, we were often coming up against architects and designers who were actually asking us, you know, this is great, we'd love to create some social value as part of our scope of work, but actually, how can we understand what design decisions we're making at this stage will, you know, create a good place, will be most relevant to the local community? Do you have anything that we can use to kind of quantify that well-being based design decision making? And our answer was no, unfortunately, we don't have anything like that yet, but that is a wonderful idea and we should look into this a little bit more. So that's exactly what we did. So what we created, and what I'll be talking about in more detail over the next few slides, is the real estate wellbeing calculator. And differently to the TOM system, what the real estate wellbeing calculator, or we call for short RUSI, what that looks like is, instead of how real estate can deliver social value and change, it actually looks at what physically makes a good place. So we're focusing on physical attributes within the built environment and looking to understand the impact of those things on people's well-being. So things like public parks, community spaces, public art, we can guess that these things will provide a benefit for people living and using those facilities. But what the real estate wellbeing calculator does is actually quantifies that impact on well-being to help us make informed design choices at kind of early stages within the development life cycle. So on that note, I will go to the next slide and chat through a little bit about how we developed this tool, and then we can talk about what it includes. So sitting behind the real estate wellbeing calculator is kind of a long period of research. Kind of over a year, we were in development and delivering research to create this tool. So that all started with obviously the idea and conversations with lots of design professionals. So we consulted with people working as architects, as transport planners, design engineering consultants, all sorts, to essentially scope out if we could create a real estate wellbeing calculator, what sorts of things would you like to see within the calculator? What would be really useful? What would you love to kind of understand better? And following those conversations, we were able to agree a list of 49 attributes, so physical features within the built environment, that we wanted to then undertake some research around to understand the impact on wellbeing that these attributes could have. And so going into the research itself, we surveyed over 5,600 respondents across the UK. And the reason why we went out to so many respondents is because we wanted to get a nationally representative sample, and a sample that would allow us to delve deeper into understanding not only the average impact on wellbeing across the UK, but also understand different value segmentations. So, for example, what's the impact of a public park on people living in an urban community versus a rural community, for example? Or what attribute do people in Birmingham value the most highly when it comes to the impact on wellbeing? And because we have such a large sample, we are able to do just that. So depending on the project context and depending on the attributes that somebody wants to design, we can look at specific data to meet the needs of kind of the communities that they're designing with the project in mind. So moving on, what are the attributes and what does the calculator include? If we could go to the next slide, I've just got a bit of a snapshot of all of the attributes. So appreciate this might be coming up quite small if people are on laptop screens. I will speak to some of the general groupings to just bring this to life a little bit more. So as I've mentioned, we have 49 attributes within the calculator, and these cover all sorts of different things. So it's applicable to different types of kind of real estate environments. We've got some attributes that are very much kind of sustainability focused, such as electric vehicle charging points, green roofs, cycle infrastructure. We also have more kind of arts and heritage focused attributes. So things like public art installations, buildings that are designed with local heritage features. And then we have some which are more community minded. So what's the wellbeing impact of a community kitchen or a community garden, or space that's specifically designed for community groups to use and reserve at an affordable rate? And so depending on the type of scheme that somebody is looking to design for and the type of community that they want to improve kind of wellbeing outcomes, we can look at which attributes are going to be well suited, which attributes are valued more or less highly by certain demographics. And the intention is to use that information to really help quantify wellbeing in design and help design teams make informed decisions. So
Fantastic.
that's it from my slides. I
Yeah,
think,
perfect. Could I just ask you, when you did that research, was there anything that really surprised you, that you kind of thought, oh, I'm kind of wasn't expecting that from that particular cohort of people or group or demographic?
I would say it was actually the opposite in a way. As we started to analyze the data and look at the trends in terms of how certain attributes are valued differently by different groups, we were actually really pleased to see that the trends that were coming through were things that we would expect, which helped us, trust the data and give it some validity. I do have an example, I think, on the next slide, which I could speak to now, actually, which I think is quite relevant to your question.
Go for it, yeah.
Just move the slide along by one. Thank you so much. So this is one of the attributes within the calculator, usable large green space, and that's defined as green space that's bigger than a football pitch size and is, freely accessible to people to use. And what we're looking at, kind of going clockwise round the circle, is how people within different kind of demographic groups or different geographies value this differently in terms of the impact it will have on their well-being. So interestingly, the group that values this attribute the lowest in terms of impact on well-being is people with self-reported poor health, which, when we started to think about why this might be, it feels like it makes sense that if people have self-reported poor health, they may be less able to utilize that large green space in the way that other people may be able to. So it starts to make sense. And then if we go round all the way to the other side, the group that value usable large green space most highly in terms of the impact it would have on their well-being, and these are income adjusted figures as well, is actually people within the lowest 10% income bracket, which again, when we started to think about why this might be, it makes sense that people within a lower income bracket are probably less likely to have large private gardens at their disposal. And in those contexts, public usable green space becomes really valuable and more impactful on their day-to-day well-being.
Brilliant, brilliant. There's just a couple of quick questions before we move on. So does the Wellbeing Real Estate Calculator align with the Wellbeing of Future Gen's goals and UN goals? Does it align with the Welsh Housing Quality Standard? And is it freely available to use?
Fab, thank you. Really great questions. So one thing that we wanted to mention, and it segues nicely into Penny's kind of few slides, which she'll be coming on to next, is that this tool is very new for us. We only launched it just before summer. So we're now kind of using it on a few projects and starting to explore where those alignments sit well. And one thing that we are exploring alignment to is the WELL standard. So we're seeing a lot of similarity between features that are included in the WELL standard and attributes that are included within the real estate wellbeing calculator. In particular, it's really helpful to refer to the WELL building standard features as a bit of a blueprint for best practice design. So where we might be working with a team that are looking at an attribute such as usable large green space, we can then also refer to the WELL building standard to think about, okay, yes, you're creating a space that meets our definition, you know, it's a certain size, it's freely accessible, but what else can we think about in terms of the features within this design to really ensure that it's best practice design? So that's the first kind of alignment we've explored. We've not yet explored alignment between the UN goals and the wellbeing of future generation goals, but definitely it's early days. So I think it's worthwhile exploring those as well. The other question around, is the calculator freely available to use? So at the moment, the calculator is being delivered by our team as a consultancy service, but we're also exploring how other organisations that want to bring some of the values in-house and apply them on their own projects, we're exploring how that can be done. So essentially, we're really open to conversations. Anyone that wants to use the data, you know, we want to get it out there. We want these values to be used and tested. So please, reach out to me if you have a use case and want to explore how we might be able to work that out.
Fantastic. Great. So listen, I just want to, this could just be for everybody. So one of the questions from Sarah is interested to know if you have any insights on how homeowners or occupiers would prioritize well-being features themselves. So it's a perfect segue into Penny. Penny, if maybe for some people who may not know about the WELL certification system, maybe if you could tell us a little bit about that and what difference it makes to health outcomes.
Absolutely. Thank you, John. So on the next slide, you will see, there we go. Thank you. That we at the IWBI, we're really driving a global movement to put people first in organizations and communities. And as you've heard, we do that. Our main tool is the WELL building standard. And it's really become a go-to guide for creating spaces that actively support human health and well-being. So on the next slide, I'll give you an example of how it might work. As we know, our physical surroundings really have a huge impact on our health, on our mood, and also on our performance. So a building can be a barrier to well-being, or it can actively support it. So WELL is a library of 500 evidence-based strategies, and these are organized across 10 core concepts, as you can see. So air, water, light, community, for example, and every single strategy is backed by many years of research and a whole lot of data. So what does it actually mean in practice? It means cleaner air and healthier water. It means better lighting and acoustics, for example, that improve focus. It means creating spaces that encourage movement and provide access to nutritious food. And just as importantly, it means fostering a culture that supports mental health and builds a strong sense of community. So the goal really is simple. It's how do we transform our buildings into places where people can truly thrive. So on the next slide, we can see that WELL really addresses the full spectrum of how our physical and our social environment shape our health. So implementing these strategies delivers clear, measurable business outcomes, from higher productivity and engagement to better talent attraction, and crucially, reduced burnout and staff turnover. On the next slide, it's just worth noting that WELL is designed to be very flexible and scalable. It works whether you focused on a single office location or maybe a few locations, or perhaps your entire global portfolio. And its power lies in how it can uniquely focus on the design of a physical space, the operational management of it, and then of course the company policies that govern it. So all three of those aspects are focused on. So on the next slide is just a nice example of what a WELL certified space might look like. So this is Henrietta House. Some of you may know it, CBRE's new WELL Platinum certified headquarters in London. And it really was designed from the ground up to support modern hybrid work and employee well-being. So instead of a sea of desks, it offers a variety of spaces, meeting areas, quiet zones, and collaboration hubs. It really empowers employees to choose the environment that best suits their task. You can see that it's flooded with natural light, and it also offers amenities like wellness studios and extensive cycle storage. And my favorite feature, you can see it on the left-hand side, is a prominent central staircase, which is a clever and simple design nudge that encourages movement by making the stairs the most appealing option. So on the next slide, the results of this approach really are compelling, and research from another of CBRE's WELL certified offices, this is in Canada, showed that after implementing these strategies, their employee turnover fell by nearly a third, and their hiring rate for new talent doubled, which really is a nice tangible return on investment. On the next slide, I just want to share a few examples from an ESG perspective, because a primary driver of many of our clients is strengthening the social component of their ESG strategy. So an organization's commitment to health is no longer a nice to have. It really is a key performance indicator of customers of social value, and one that investors, employees, and customers expect to be measured, managed, and absolutely reported on. So this is why dozens of leading companies now feature WELL as proof of their social achievements in their ESG and sustainability reporting. So one of my last slides, the next slide, please, is really just demonstrating a growing body of research which demonstrates a clear and compelling ROI for healthy building strategies. So this ROI looks quite different for different stakeholders. So for employers and for owner-occupiers, it's about human capital. You can see improved productivity, engagement, and talent attraction, which directly translates to lower HR costs from reduced burnout and attrition. But for developers and landlords, the benefit is really as clear. You can command premium rental rates. And in fact, the data shows a 10-year net financial return of over £85 per square foot for a healthy, high-performing building. And this scales to a global level. So a recent 2025 study from the McKinsey Health Institute and the World Economic Forum shows that prioritizing employee health isn't just good for a single company. It could potentially generate up to $12 trillion in global economic value, which is enormous. And then on the next slide, you'll see that the demand for WELL is really accelerating. We've already brought over 100 of the Fortune 500 companies into our community. As Phoebe mentioned earlier, we share many clients with the Social Value Portal, and we are currently exploring alignment with how these two tools can help our shared customers understand their commonalities and synergies. And then my final slide is, if you want to get involved in the WELL movement, how can you do that? I'm also seeing some of the questions coming into the chat. So a really good place to start is to explore our resources. The WELL standard itself is open source. It's free to download from our website. You'll also find on our website a huge amount of case studies, research, and webcast recordings. If you want to go deeper individually, you can become a well-accredited professional, or what we call a well AP, and you could join our global network. We have 27,000 well APs around the world. And if it's in terms of your own organization, the next step is often just a simple conversation about how do you integrate some of these health strategies into your own policies and culture. So just know that I'm here as a resource for that conversation. Please feel free to connect with me if that's useful. Thank you, John.
Penny, that's brilliant. It's like I know I use the resource myself. I find it really fantastic. It's just things that maybe you forget the impact that they can actually have in terms of performance and productivity of people on a constant basis. I'm interested to know, you know, this move, obviously that's causing a bit of tension where CEOs want people back in the office and lots of people don't want to go back into the office. But what difference does it make? I mean, I can imagine, like, if you worked in that the CBRE office that you showed, it's probably much easier to get people to go back to that environment rather than just go back to maybe a dull and boring one. Do you have any research on that? Is it breaking that barrier?
Absolutely, John. I think what's interesting, understanding the research, is that it's different per different generation. So the younger generations actually want to connect and be part of a community, and are really happy to come back into the office, we find. But the way that the office environment is promotes not just well-being, but if the organization is aligned with higher social value goals, it really appeals. We find that those organizations are much more easily able to attract talented individuals if they embody these well-being practices in all that they do. So absolutely.
Yeah. No, I think I might look for a job there myself. So just one other thing you mentioned when we were talking previously was just about, you know, sustainable finance, and actually the importance of actually, you know, if you're building a building and you're going to have it well certified, the difference that makes in terms of trying to get finance. Could you just very quickly explain that?
Yes, it's very interesting to understand how our clients globally are using WELL to leverage more favorable loan agreements. So we have some examples, and I think specifically in the APAC region, where organizations have been able to secure a lower interest rate when there is a commitment to pursue WELL certification. And because WELL lowers risk for an investor, because you can, the return on investment that I've just shown you is so obvious. There's a real financial incentive to implementing these strategies, which is really interesting to see. We're also seeing some governments using WELL in some of their taxonomies as a reference for implementing well-being guidelines. So it's been used across the globe. Yeah,
makes a lot of sense. So I mean, like, that again is a perfect transition into Craig. Thanks, Penny. And Craig, obviously we've heard about carbon credits, and what I'm really interested in with Agile is the way you've managed to kind of use that concept of carbon credits to unlock potential in terms of land, in terms of making it more affordable for people to build houses. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Sure, of course. And Leovita, if you could go to the next slide, that would be great. Thank you. And then again. There we are. Thank you very much. Hello, I've done my introduction. Craig White, CEO of Agile Home, and I'll explain what we're doing. Next slide, please. So I'm going to be talking about carbon and social value trading, and those are just pictures of what that will look like. And I'll explain how this will actually bring new finance, so not grant, but actually private sector funding into the delivery of properly affordable homes. Next slide. So some of you might remember something called the property ladder. If you're under the age of 36, you may not be on the property ladder and might be participating as generation rent. So an affordable home has become the oxymoron of our time, that those two words do not really work together anymore. The housing crisis is decades old, but we have in the past delivered 420,000 homes a year. Our grandparents were capable of doing that. It seems that today we can't quite get there, but I think things will change. And of course, the climate emergency is a big part of everybody's concern. And that 40% of all anthropogenic CO2 emissions are caused by the built environment, the heating, lighting, ventilation, and cooling of our homes. So we looked at how could we build a different model, and there are only three primary input costs into delivering an affordable home. Land, it's scarce. Mark Twain said, buy land, they're not building anymore. We would contend he was wrong. Labor, average age in construction is now 54. 300,000 of whom will retire or have aspirations to retire in the next 3 to 5 years. We have a different kind of solution there. And materials, cost of materials are very volatile. We've had a pandemic, war in Europe, interest rate crisis, and Mr. Trump seems to be the disruptor in chief at the moment around volatility on pricing. We have a fintech solution. Next slide, please. So what do we do that's unique? If we're going to do something very different to get houses properly affordable, we need to change the way we build our equations. So modern methods of construction, we're a prefabrication business. The current fail rate total in prefabrication across Europe is 6.7 billion. And that's because everybody invested in a factory, and we don't do that. We do something called distributed manufacture. That means we build our homes, we prefabricate our homes near where the projects will be, creating local economy pound uplifts. We don't buy land. We unlock land on behalf of other people, and we can do that for as low as £1. And we do that by building up a social value calculation that can demonstrate that. And I'll speak to that more closely. In terms of labour, we've worked with the Ministry of Justice and the Prison and Probation Service, and we now manufacture some of our build systems inside prison workshops. Today, we have 13 prisoners released on temporary license at our facility in Oxfordshire, and we provide skills training and education and a pathway to meaningful employment. So the social impact index for that is very high. And then we created something called carbon and social value trading, where we actually build our buildings out of renewable materials provided by nature. And so nature does carbon capture. We are simply doing the storage of those materials inside our building. And then we've monetized the social impact. The peace dove means we're not trying to compete with conventional incumbent house builders. We're working in what we call the vacuum of the housing crisis. So the picture on the right-hand side is 18 homes for social rent for Somerset Council, built on land that was an under-occupied car park near the town centre of Frome. It only had 25% occupancy, and this project will start on site in the new year for 100% social rent. We did the land unlock, and we've got that land transferred at a discount to a housing association. Next slide, please. This is the centre I talked about, where we have conventional colleagues, but also colleagues released on temporary license from Grendon Spring Hill. They drive themselves to work every day, dress like me, do their work, and then they go home. They might not call it home, but that's what they do at the end of every day. And there are pictures there of prisoners. I won't point and name any of them, but this is where we do our skills training and education, and it's an inclusive research and development center. And there is one person in that picture now that is a graduate of this program. I can name him. He's called Dan. He's now a colleague, and he showed great aptitude at supervision of other prisoners learning how to do this. Next slide, please. So how do we unlock land? There are 3 acts of parliament by which we do that. Custom and Self-Build Act 2015, most people won't have heard of that, but that's a land supply that every local authority is obligated to provide housing that can't be sold to commercial developers, but can be for community-led housing projects, housing co-ops, housing associations, charities, and third sectors. then the Housing Act 1985 builds in something called a best value test. So local authorities don't own land. They never own land. It was an asset transfer. So the Secretary of State, he or she, has to do an assessment. If Bristol City Council, Manchester or Leeds wants to sell land, they have to do an assessment that includes a best value calculation. And then we have something called the Social Value Act, and that's probably why most of you are here today. So what we have is a new equation. The value of the land equals the market test, what it would be worth on for sale, less the best value, less the social value calculation. So we build a social value stack which discounts the land, and we've got 4 sites unlocked for £1 and 8 sites at significant discounts. Next slide, please. So carbon credits, we build with renewable materials. There's Elon Musk in his Tesla. If you own a Tesla, well done. You're saving 273 kilograms of atmospheric CO2 equivalent per year, which is amazing for a car. But in our homes, we're storing 27,000 kilograms of atmospheric CO2 equivalent in the actual fabric of the building. So we do carbon capture and storage in ludicrous mode. The current trade price for a ton of carbon stored is 64 trillion. And it's worth reminding ourselves that Elon Musk last year, 2024, received 2.76 billion in carbon credits. Agile is bringing carbon credits into the delivery of affordable homes. Next slide, please. Have we done it? So this is the certificate for the world's first trade for carbon and social value. We did it with a tier 1 legal firm called Shakespeare Martineau, who work a lot in social housing. The trade was for £45,000. £2,500 was for the carbon storage. The other £42,500 was for the social value. And why would an organization like this write cash into these projects? Well, this is for a Ukrainian woman refugee and her 2 children, currently in bed and breakfast accommodation in Bristol, who will now be in a new safe home next year. And the fact is, if you employ more than 250 people in the UK as a corporate, you're legally obligated to cap and trade your carbon emissions. And now we've brought social value, and social value is an uncapped multiplier of the value of the carbon storage. Next slide. And here's an example of one we've just handed over for Places for People. This is 7 homes built for formerly homeless people coming off the streets with complex needs. It's built on a 45-degree slope, so we're called Agile for a lot of different reasons. These are on steel, on stilts, not steel, it's all wood. And we've actually captured and stored 122 tons, which I would trade that at £1,000 per ton, £100 per ton, that's 12,000. Multiply it by about 20 for the social value. I can build 2 homes for free. Next slide, please. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
But like it's fantastic because it just seems like a bunch of win-wins all over the place, Craig. I mean, this is as simple as going to an organization and saying, you're going to be paying a check over for carbon credits. Why don't you give us that check and we'll incorporate sustainable materials in the buildings? Is that as simple as it is?
Yes, there's lots of hearts and minds that need to be convinced on the way. There's lots of verification. There's lots of backup to all of that. But effectively, any corporate in Europe is obligated to publish their carbon accounts. Year 1, they do that. Year 2, it has to be lower. Year 3, lower, and into the future. And so you do your car policies, you do your light bulbs, and then suddenly you can't reduce your emissions. And then we go, hi, have you thought about carbon credits as storage? And by the way, your ESG team might actually be interested in the people-centered narrative. And that's the really exciting thing. By locking it together, you get this wonderful story of somebody being safely homed while doing your legal obligation, and then corporately being able to tell a fabulous story about how you're supporting people in housing need.
Absolutely brilliant. Suzanne there is saying she's so interesting, but a little complicated for my brain. We'll send the slides on to our development team when they come through. It is, I mean, there's a lot in what you've just gone through, and I completely understand. When I heard it first time round, I was kind of, it nearly sounds too good to be true, but it's fantastic. So really, congratulations coming up with it.
Thank you. I didn't have grey hair when I started, so it's taken some time. There you go.
Right. Well, listen,
thank you.
I believe Olivia is back with us. Her system crashed, unfortunately, but please God, she's there. And it's interesting, actually, because Olivia's short presentation it actually kind of links in with the three that went before, you know, in terms of Craig talking about unlocking land, and we're talking about building additionality with Phoebe and what things will bring social value. And then obviously we were talking with Penny about de-risking any projects. And so this presentation from Penny does all three of those. So over to you, Penny. Or sorry, over to you, Olivia. My apologies.
That's all right, John. Thanks everyone. Sorry about that earlier. Classic technical glitches. It wouldn't be a normal panel unless there was one glitch. Just to introduce myself. So I'm Olivia Sutcliffe. I'm an associate director within Savills. But within Savills, we have Savills Earth, which is our sustainable consultancy services. So I provide strategic consultancy services out across all of the built environment for social value. So if we go to the next slide, I just thought I'd introduce who we are as a team, because we're really quite unique on what we do. So we are the market leading track record of creating social value within the built environment. So we have this wonderful team that you can see on screen there. We're headed up by our director, Wesley Ankara, who's come from both kind of client side, but also originally started off in the kind of third sector, actually working on the ground with kids and going from that background. My background, I was previously Social Value Portal a few years ago, but then I actually went to public sector. I was in the Greater London Authority. So we all come with a different background, whereas Sarah in our team, the other associate director, she's actually a quantity surveyor and a RICS accredited, and also actually an assessor for it. So brings lots of different lenses of where we come from and comes with an EMEA investment background. So we really are kind of a unique team, but the one thing that unites us and all our clients we speak to is about realizing that social value is an investment, not a cost. And actually, if you create vision strategies that demonstrate commercial viability and value uplift, that's where you're going to create shared benefits all across all stakeholders. And that includes both the local authority, the communities, and also the real estate industry itself. So it's really about shifting that from just thinking about the positive outcomes to actually thinking about commercial viability. How do we make social value work commercially for businesses, and how do you ensure that you do that in the most impactful way to ensure that the communities are brought on that journey and have a real say in what is happening. And it's really important to say we work across all the asset life cycle. So this was really exciting for me. I can go from working with a local authority to doing some really cool, exciting kind of policy work, to then working with a developer on a strategic land site, or potentially mid-development through planning, or also looking at, we've got a site and how do we get the right tenants in, to then how do we dispose of this site in the right way to ensure that the communities are integrated in that for the future. So it's a really exciting, innovative team, and I can say no two clients and no 2 days are the same for me. And if we just go on to the next slide, there's 3 words that John's already introduced that for me really speak to all professionals about what social value can do for the built environment. And it's not just for the built environment, but particularly from what we see is there's 3 key words. So unlocking land, just like we've just heard from Craig, there are so many opportunities, but also from our side, we're seeing that investors are looking about how our developments, especially with the increase of costs at the moment, how is social value that differentiated to help you unlock that investment and unlock land. De-risking, so things such as a local authority, so Salford City Council, if you submit a major planning application, you have to demonstrate your social value as part of your planning process. And we're seeing lots of more local authorities bringing it as part of the new NPPF regulations, so the National Planning Framework that came in. They're looking at actually sustainable development and thinking about that social element as part of that. So it's helping de-risking planning, but also say de-risking getting the right tenants and getting those pre-let agreements agreements in. And then that additionality, it's really about helping to go above and beyond and demonstrate authentically with the local communities you're wanting to work with that actually you are willing to go above and beyond. And it's not just a tick box Section 106 requirement, or it's not just an offsite investment somewhere else. It's about actually you building those authentic relationships and doing that additionality to really demonstrate why your site, your development, your built environment asset is there to help the communities in the long term, which is something that I think that additionality piece the real estate sector has been doing, but hasn't necessarily been communicating in the right way, hasn't necessarily been strategizing it right from the start. So if all developers, landowners, investors have been doing it, they've been seeing it as that kind of additionality or that cost. But actually thinking about it right from the start, that's when it becomes that additionality and that investment. So that's kind of the mindset that we have and the shift that we work with our clients on. And if you go to the next slide, the way that we talk about social value is really interesting. This is where I think it kind of ties together all of what the speakers have been saying to date, is actually how do we think about who to integrate? So if we look at the wellbeing calculator that SVP have developed, actually, how do we know who to get involved in these things and what the stakeholders that can be involved in the community? So we have something called the 4 pillars of people at Savills that we've created. So the 4 pillars of how people look at people who work in a place or space, or people who live in a place and space. So if you're, say, building a mixed use scheme, you would traditionally be thinking about them. You'd be thinking, okay, who's living in my C3 residential and who's going to work in the retail offices, the F&B, but also the offices that we're building. That's traditionally who you would be thinking about. And you'd be thinking about, okay, what social value can I deliver for them? You might be thinking about who's going to use our public realm when it comes to our public art strategy, who's going to use our transport and infrastructure that we're designing, who's potentially going to come in and use, say, the assets that we're building, i.e., I don't know, leisure facilities or things such as retail outlets, how is going to be using them. You'd think about them. But then the fourth one is who would not typically have access, or who feels like they don't belong or have a place or space, who do not belong in the place or space you're creating. And that, for us, is the missed opportunity when it comes to social value. If you think about that 4th pillar in conjunction with all the other 3 pillars, aligned with the needs and preference of the area, but also the policies and the key priorities of the local authority area you're working in, and work in that collaboration sense, then there's significant value add, and you can then create a lasting impact. And that's where sometimes a lot of the conversation and some of the criticism comes out about the terrible word, or the dreaded word in the real estate sector about gentrification, is sometimes it's about forgetting that 4th pillar and really integrating them into the place or space that's been designed, delivered, and occupied in that long-term stewardship aspect. So that's kind of just a real interesting way of thinking about that. And that's what we do with our clients. So for an example that we've got here is we worked with a developer, and we thought about, okay, it's developing, it was Delancey and Islington, and Islington are really proactive with their thoughts. We thought, okay, it's a life science building, but actually from our local needs, we can think about who's going to work in the space, but actually who would never have an opportunity to work in that space. So we actually developed a social value strategy that came up with investing in child's mental health, because that was a clear issue that came out through engagement with the community. So actually now investing in something called neuro-linguistic programming, which is essentially proactive therapy for kids with anxiety, helping them to address some of those key challenges, which means that hopefully they will be able to stay in education and potentially have careers in STEM. And then just really quickly, my last slide, if you could go next, please. Just a couple of examples again of how this can do. So that 3rd example was the Delancey, the partnerships approach. So we worked in partnership with that neuro-linguistic programming, but also with the council to really understand, and the schools to unlock that opportunity. The second one in the middle there is the Crown Estate. So we're working with the Crown Estate on Cambridge Business Park, which is a £2 billion life sciences redevelopment scheme. And actually, we're really working proactively with different community groups to co-design what the space should look like and how the communities can be integrated in that. Because part of the feedback we've had is it's traditionally a business park where security keeps people out. So we've actually just done an inclusion workshop with adults with learning disabilities from a local charity to actually work out what would a community cafe look and feel like to them and what makes them happy. We've now taken that and we're going to mold that in with our architects into the actual design of the place that is being created. And then the final example is actually from a local authority side. And this is what I really like to understand and stress the importance of, is actually when it comes down to social value, there's a lot of authorities that can take the power and lead and set the expectations of what they want to see. So Salford is a perfect example of this. So we did a priorities-based social value framework. So we did local needs, and then we went out into the communities to really hear what is important to them. And that is actually understanding and excelling and communicating the community intelligence to ensure that that is built into design and delivery and that long-term stewardship. So they're the kind of three things that we'd recommend to ensure that social value is an investment, not a cost, which I guess ties together what everyone's been saying. Is the data and quantification is fantastic, but you actually need to do it and do it in the right way. Community intelligence, co-design and partnerships will help you do that. And that's me.
That's great. Thank you for doing that so fast, actually. My brain is still trying to keep up with everything you were talking about, because it's interesting, you talk about social cohesion. I think that's becoming a bigger and bigger issue for the world in terms of trying to break down barriers and having people from different locations living together. I think it's hugely important. Just in terms of the sense of identity one, could you just talk into that a little bit more? How exactly do you build that sense of identity?
Yeah, so for us, the first thing that you always have to do to help build a sense of identity is you need to understand the place. And that's something that sometimes can be seen as a tick box exercise. So what we tend to do is we do something called an audit. Or a local needs analysis. There's lots of different ways of describing it. Understanding the local community, the key demographics issues, which for us data nerds, the brand new data is getting released at the end of this month, and also understanding the key community groups that exist. But then for us, we go that level above and go and directly engage with those communities and have those authentic conversations. And it's not a consultation, it's engagement. So engagement ensures that they get something back as well. By having those authentic conversations with lots of different stakeholders across the entire spectrum of the community, then this takes lots of months. That enables you to really understand what those key social challenges are and what actually would make a sense of identity for the place and space. Okay. So it's through that authentic listening is the best way to go about that.
Fantastic. Phoebe, I know you answered a question there for Amy offline, but maybe you might just answer that for everybody. So it's just Amy was asking, how do you avoid double counting with the REWC model with the TOMS model?
Yeah, absolutely. And great question. So it's good to clarify. So people that use the TOMS system, that is looking at social value, and it's a measurement framework. So it's looking at what activities and interventions create social value, and then using that framework to actually measure and report on activities that are delivered, to then claim that value, if you like, in terms of pound pence that have been unlocked. RUSI is a different kind of calculator, and it's not a measurement framework. So that's an important kind of distinction. What RUSI is a calculator to be used at early stage design as a decision-making tool. It's not then taken forward into the use and occupation of a space to then measure the impact on well-being. It's kind of forecasting so that those design decisions can be made instead.
Fantastic. Great. I cannot understand how we've gone through 55 minutes already, but unfortunately we have. So all there's time for me to do is thank the contributors on the panel: Phoebe from Social Value Portal, Penny from the Well Institute, Craig from Agile, and Olivia from Sutcliffe from Savills. It's been, I found it fascinating and really insightful. So thank you so much for the audience for joining us today. Hopefully you also found it really interesting, and will be able to think differently about building in the future and how you're actually going to go about utilizing the tools that are there to ensure that you build in social value. So thank you very much, everybody. Take care.